Star Wars isn't knocked out, but it's certainly on the ropes as an IP. Star Wars Outlaws from Ubisoft and Massive aim to offer something a bit different. A take on Star Wars without the Jedi and the Sith rip-snorting through complexes engaged in lightsaber combat, but instead a peek into the scruffy-looking lives of scoundrels. And with that, you got my attention. Let's see how the game did. As always, this is KARAK, and these reviews are not 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Subscribe, comment for a chance to win the game. We'll give a couple of copies away. So this is my review for Star Wars Outlaws. The return of Revlon helmet hair, Vulcan neck pinches and punch form, and the adventures of Natalie Drake. Graphically, Outlaws is a mixed bag, as random as the partners that Kay invites on her team. First, it can be gorgeous. If there's one thing the Massive team does well is put in a lived-in feel to locations, walking up to a special trader who travels from planet to planet, and that location looks exactly as you would expect. Items out for sale, examples just waiting to catch the eye of buyers, and droids milling around doing droid things. Moving through the cities, it's not like a Bethesda game, or at least prior to Starfield, where 10 characters seem to inhabit the same massive space. Here there are people milling around everywhere, buying, selling, and talking. Massive just knows how to make city spaces, something that we haven't seen in a lot of these games, where they can feel more lean, they're inhabited, and it makes a huge difference. They're also distinct. Hell, even the outposts in the smaller towns on each planet have a different vibe than their own main thoroughfares. Later sections, getting the water repulsor for the bike, shows where ideas that Massive has and have had in the past are able to be displayed here. Extraordinary sections, fantastic moments of jet skiing across lakes like some weekend summer douche without a care in the world about churning up wake onto other people, finding hidden spots to explode or be exploded in. The game sprawled across each planet with their own unique flora and fauna, forests, cities, deserts, frozen planets where people huddle up against sci-fi burn barrels like futuristic Detroit. Also, the dynamic weather for the most part is on point. Huge sandstorms, rainstorms, and the snow and effects are excellent, and they change dynamically. Graphically, the game really does reflect Star Wars well, even in places and planets we haven't seen before, each adding something new to the look and the feel and the vibe of the entire game. And this is no better reflected than just taking an example of the Empire's ships and stations. Star Wars has always had that sort of steamworks and sci-fi pipes motif that graphically represents something that looks like very few other fictions. The ultra-reflective floors, clean aesthetic, big bold buttons, even crawling through the haphazardly large droid and HVAC systems has all these pipes and wires in them, and no matter where you go, there's some kind of detail that you can see. Character designs are also pretty good, from your partner in crime, a robot with a war wound sparking and scratching across his chest, to all of the different aliens that you collect, talk to, or just walk by. Kay herself feels a little bit like a female version of Han Solo, with a bit of differences rubbed in there. Well, there's apparently been entire volumes written about Kay's character and voice actress not looking alike, which we've seen in many games, including titles like The Last of Us, and yes, it's present here. What really is disappointing to me, though, are the NPC faces. They are insanely low quality other than the aliens, like someone ironed their faces and it shows up in the really bad voice syncing a lot of the times. It almost looks like everybody's wearing some kind of disguise so that the Empire can't chase them down. In idea, structure, and just overall look, Star Wars looks amazing. And that's regardless of the settings. Let's talk about performance. The game has a number of settings, many of which include ray tracing, but it has the standards, the shadows, texture detail, draw in detail, as well as scatter and much more. Ray tracing has many levels. Also, it's got direct RT lighting and path tracing as options. Sadly, the game on a technical level probably won't allow you to really play at that all the time, or at the very least without taking some caveats into place. With an AMD 7800 X3D and a 4090, with the settings on high and the RTX all on, the game had some pretty big graphical drops on particular planets and particular locations that would crop up randomly, as well as some known locations that the developers are looking at. We're talking barely over 30 FPS without DLSS on. So this is a game where if you're going to do RTX of any kind, you're going to absolutely have to have DLSS on at some level. With DLSS on performance, that number jumps up dramatically in many sections, well above 100, with the different upscalers that the game offers. You're going to want to if you're running at 4K and sometimes even 1440p. Its quality, though, noticeably drops when you turn that DLSS up, so be aware. FSR, Intel's version, and TSR fared either slightly worse or slightly better depending on the quality quality level that you set compared to DLSS without frame gen, but it's much easier to throw the settings down a couple notches and then maybe turn DLSS up a level. It's also not rare to see huge FPS drops. I died a couple times straight up from low FPS in those sections, which sucks, as many times elsewhere that doesn't happen. Another space where this occurs is, weirdly enough, Tatooine. It makes some sense, it's the busiest planet with the longest draw distances, but just get a couple speeders in there and a sandstorm. When combat happens, the drops are noticeable, and because those aren't real frames, your input is still tied to the original frame. So there's some issues there. You can turn on latency reduction, and you obviously should. Also, currently, the game does have some issues with loading into and out of saves. I definitely noticed a stuttery, juddery mess that was just impossible to play sometimes when I loaded into the game. Going out and coming back in didn't fix those, and actually shut down the game and start it back up, and then those issues just magically went away, and it really didn't depend on the save. It could just happen at any time. Now, setting everything to low, yes, even very low cards can run this. Be aware the game's texture work and basic geometry settings at that level start to look sort of bad, especially texture resolution, because this is some Fallout 4 texture levels in some spots. They're in your face many times. It really takes a dive here. The developers know about some of these issues, and they've already patched out a large number as I've had this review code. This is currently tested with the most recent. Your mileage is going to vary, but be aware there's a bunch of settings you can do. Put them in the middle, try it out. And I really do suggest you try it without ray tracing, because as a true test to see what Massive can do mixing and matching urban environments with rural on the Snowdrop engine, it's hard not to see this as a really good example, as long as you realize that most games ray tracing is out without other caveats. The delivery of the world, and once you got into it, speeder biking around, it's just phenomenal looking. Let's talk about the audio presentation.
Pin me! She'll take you down. Oh, that helps.
Look, if you hear me off, Strat's guys already cleaned me out.
It's okay, it's okay. I'm an old friend of Gadik's. My name's Kay.
Gadik never talked about you.
Yeah, he wouldn't. But he told me you could mod my speeder.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
How much we're going quiet, man? They won't quit!
Overall, this works really great. If they hadn't nailed this, there'd be hell to pay, especially for a game with so much source material. You can easily hedge on many of the sound effects from movies, TV shows, and audio dramas that Star Wars is replete with. Each location, planet, and spaceship you struggle to escape, having a really nice sample set to add to the environments, and that does a great deal to make you feel like you are truly in a Star Wars game. Overall, the 3D audio was also very well done. When it comes to the voice work, this is obviously going to be very subjective, though Kay isn't particularly noteworthy in attitude or tone. That's absolutely more reflective of her lines and direction than her delivery. Case in point, a particular mission she has where she shows insane range and emotion around something that happened and does a really tremendous job in that part. Some of her party are also pretty good, though no one comes within blaster distance or even Death Star distance of HK-47 or Cameron's excellent voice work in Jedi Fallen Order or Survivor. Due to the way the game plays out, even with its so-called major villain, the writing just isn't there. Not even something like the petulant, whining temper tantrums in a shitty BMX mask that we got from Kylo Ren throwing his toys around the room. Very toned down, which I found surprising. Musically, though, it is not toned down. This is excellent, and while using established formulas that could fit within any of the movies, they also branch out a bit. The opening menu music, for instance, starts with something closer to the Division's eerie, synth-heavy beat, and then fades into more classical John Williams-esque scores. Excellent change-ups, and from stingers to longer musical tracks, it fits perfectly. Also, while some games have gone lean, this game usually does have some kind of music playing, and I gotta tell you, makes it feel much more like an action game at those times. Speaking of action, let's talk about the gameplay. Outlaws is set in the Star Wars universe, nestled around The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. The narrative centers around Kay, who's a scoundrel who relies on this crew for a high-stakes heist to settle a debt with one of the many crime syndicates in the game. It's a third-person game. Think Wildlands or Division with Uncharted mixed in, and it'll get you about halfway there. In Outlaws, I found myself almost instantly engaged in this weird tit-for-tat, caught in the grips of these four different powerful factions. You have the Ashiga clan, Crimson Dawn, the Pike Syndicate, and the Hutt Cartel. And trust me, none of these suckers are good guys. The Hutts trading exotic animals, bribery, and threat. The Pike were typical criminals with one lord and everyone wanting his job. The Crimson Dawn have one mode, pure treachery. And the Ashiga are the wild cards, and I'll just leave it at that. Every choice I made had a tangible impact on Kay's reputation with each of these factions. When I kept a good rapport with somebody, it opened up new locations that I could walk into without a problem, assignments, and even gave me discounts in the shops. Quests themselves are split into main quests, side intel, major intel, jobs you can take from factions, key parts intel for collections, and you'll also be able to highlight each and check their available information. Somewhat like the investigative quests that we had and we saw make their way into the Assassin's Creed games, the quests have you actually scouting out information without exact locations for many of them. Something like eavesdropping on people or finding data in hackable computers, or at times just looking around a location for a part or a person you need to make that one last cool thing. Each mission can take you to different planets, to stations, to land locations, all in the same quest or mission. And I had one where items I needed were tracked across one planet, back to my ship, to another planet, and farther on. That galaxy-spanning feeling of Star Wars is there in those quests, even if some of the quests were the atypical, go here, find that, return to me. Kay also starts out with a standard blaster, the ability to knock out enemies with stealth, and Nyx, her fast-like-a-freak companion, big-eyed, dopey-looking Neopet thing. Some missions require insane amounts of stealth between you and Nyx, killing enemies on the sly, knocking out commanders and stealing items, or helping some criminal piece of crap get out of a crappy situation so they can do more crap. Star Wars in this game has more stealth than many titles that we've seen Ubisoft having piped out on their platter of buffet-like titles, each slightly flavored to feel different than the others. Kay can blast away and watch some buffoon get tasered with the blue circular stun pulse doesn't ever stop getting fun, but I didn't really expect just how much you would do stealth. Nyx doesn't have his own reward poster and death unit, which is absolutely surprising because using him to scratch the eyes out of Imperial leaders or leap onto the face of some stormtrooper so you can wallop them, as it does having him just go remotely detonate explosives, crate leaking gas canisters, and more. He's a cuter gremlin, but the dude's frankly always up past 12, and somebody did feed him. I just wish Ubisoft wouldn't go the Red Dead 2 route with this game. Now, let me explain. In many of those missions, the game restricts you from fast traveling. Fine, they want you to hoof it. I have no issue with that. But I'm so goddamn tired of seeing restricted area pop up in this game, as it means instant failure if you leave it for too long. Or, if you get caught, it's an instant checkpoint restart if you alert the enemy. Most of the Empire missions are like that. I would have loved a bit more flexibility, but there were countless times I saw a mission objective and thought, I'm going to sneak like a freak over here and over there and do this right, and nope, mission restriction, go back to mission area because some random stormtrooper saw you instantly. You still do have the stun and a couple things that you can interrupt that with, as well as some special moves that you have, but you have a really short timing for that. Other times you can go loud though, and the game has a soft cover system for when you need to cool down your blaster. As you get more blaster abilities like ion and rapid fire, charged fire, and more, you can switch between them on the controller with the Y button. This is vital because droids are covered in blaster reflective armor, and shooting them is like throwing dildos at a skyscraper. It's just not going to do shit. It'll look funny, but it won't do anything. Switch to ion though, it only takes a couple shots to overcharge them. The upgrades, while both being expansive with the blaster able to get all sorts of unique firing styles, also momentarily drops the ball in the form of weapons that are released from enemies when they die in the game world. Because while most of the weapons you can pick up if you have a skill for it, or just starting out you can pick up the lower level ones, they're great. Heavy fire power grenade launchers, laser rifles, they can be the difference between laughing at everyone in the Sarlacc pit or being in it yourself. But the biggest issue here is Kay takes every goddamned opportunity to drop it. I can only assume she actually has sticks of butter for fingers. Climb onto stuff, drop it. Go through a crack in the wall, drop it. Pretty much any action causes her to drop that weapon. And it's frustrating because it brings up the gamified element of her only having her blaster to the forefront. Lastly, the platforming, and there is a huge amount here. Space Tomb Raider. She has more climbing ability and rappel ability than Laura did on her best days. She may be poor in cash flow, but she is absolutely rich in the ability to climb fat stacks and mountainsides. And luckily, yellow paint apparently means climbable in any alien language. Nevertheless, there's also a ton of invisible obstructions here, and many are right in line with a place that you can climb or a spot you can run through. It's a huge amount of land to test, and I get that, but I can't count how many times I couldn't leap over a rock's low area, but the higher spot I could, or where Kay seemingly just instantly wanted to go between two rocks, but because apparently they have astral projection, one of those rocks was 1.5 times the width it should have been. In many ways, Outlaws is an excellent litmus test for the tech of Massive's engine handling these games, like, for instance, Far Cry in the future, which that title switched away from their old engine to this one. And these are also noticeable in the gameplay. For instance, it's profoundly impactful on the feeling of a true world when you can see such far-off detailed structures and enemies. Also, its ability to handle cityscapes already displayed by the Division comes out here. And while the game is an open world, when not restricted on the mission path, it's pretty goddamn incredible. Exploring the lands has you finding all kinds of outposts, people doing work, both good and bad, and criminal everywhere. You're going to get chased around, you're going to get shot at, or ask for help, or just blindly allowed to run around grabbing everybody else's shit, because apparently in the future, normal ownership is really just a flexible rule. It may not feel as open or large or reactive as GTA, but I gotta say, this was surprisingly good and not at all what I expected. After 10 hours solo just devoted to checking this part of the game out, I can say there were a lot of surprises in the game world. I was also surprised to find a nice middle ground in the space sections too. Let's get one thing out of the way. This isn't Elite Dangerous, Everspace, or anything like that. It's basically a flight system with different upgradable lasers and missiles, as well as some special outlaw kind of maneuvers you can get, like 180 turns and 360 barrel rolls that can be pulled out when you need them. While yes, spaceflight is contained to large areas outside the planet, it also has a lot of missions that can take place there. I was surprised to notice that they were busier than expected. TIE fighters doing rounds, pirates pirating, and a lot of random items you can gather. But there's also a couple stations out there, so it's a nice break up of the more planet-bound mission structure, and the game has you moving between them very well. Also, there's almost nothing like the prior Ubisoft map mess we've seen in other games. The journal isn't exactly succinct, and at times it can be difficult to read, but other than the towns, which do show you markers of interest, the rest is there for you to find. The places are more than large enough to find a ton of different locations and items and people to talk to or engagements to get in, and it's just a nice relief from the clutter of a map mess. And that's all great, and you'd think, hey, this is a cool ship, it's people that I can customize, there must be a ton, but there's really not. Where she has coats and pants and blaster holsters and boots and some clothing for Nyx, it's decidedly lean on that side. And somehow, even the damn spaceship is bland. Think about it this way, in a world of Y-Wings, X-Wings, lopsided Cyclops, Millennium Falcons, and close iron ships in the form of Slave One, somehow your ship here is a goddamned box with 4 thrusters. And sure, you can paint it up and upgrade it, and that's not the only thing I found weird in this game, and it follows a pattern. Many systems, many options, but a lack of particular depth. Missions can sound like they have a ton of options, but when you get into most of them, it's solidly open this hatch, shoot a very particularly placed power supply to close off the door, and that power supply is sometimes right there in the room, like the electrician got really lazy and didn't want to run extra wire, or when it's not, it's usually in the room next to it. What might be the worst offender here is surprisingly the story and the character. While I don't think a game like this needs Jedi and Sith at all, the dark underbelly of crime and normally people trying to live without being crushed under it is fascinating to me. With Star Wars, by the time I was done, I was solidly trying to figure out what in the hell Kay's story actually was. What you have is a character with very little real drive, or it's not portrayed well. Doing jobs for damn near everyone, but the threat of losing that is never really there. The big overarching threat never really feels real, and to me, it wasn't interesting. And even with all the choices, the way the game's systems work, even with things going terrible during an insurrection and you're left with Kay, never really reacting to it other than to say, oh wow, yeah, that's really bad on a phone call to somebody. It gets noticeably better later on, but for the first 8 to 10 hours, that story really did not do much to grab me. And the systems in play, while enjoyable for a while, also don't have a ton of depth in them. And remember, this is a game where you're not necessarily combat focused, so you really can't even rest on that. Let's also talk about the bugs. I got 2 crashes total in 30 plus hours, but I also got a save game bug. A moment when no matter what I did, I was stuck, I couldn't take off, I couldn't get out of the ship, and I had to choose a totally different save. Luckily, the game saves often, so loading another one lost me only like 10 or 30 minutes at the absolute max, but that sucked. And while in the cities, I see the occasional enemy pop up or path weirdly, nothing directly pushed me out of the game world in those spots. But in one spot where it did is in speeder sections. So let me explain this. In the speeder, anybody who owns one is a friggin' idiot. I don't know why, but I swear the AI on the speeder is just not turned on. They'll sit on the speeder, they'll not get off while I'm trouncing them with lasers, they'll ram back and forth with reckless abandon between 2 rocks like they were bullied by geologists as kids. This is also highly noticeable when you have a large fight with bands that attack outposts as they get off their bikes and then stand in a row, regardless of the difficulty setting. I like to review games and test all the difficulties as well to see how it works. While you have the AI issues, stormtroopers walking into fire, getting caught on items, and basically doing what stormtroopers do, the one part here I would suggest you change is enemies' health. Hitting them with laser bolts 10 times in the face, but realizing that only one punch can knock them out starts to feel weird. Luckily, you can switch this back and forth during combat, and I found there was an excellent combination of settings, but mostly it had to do with low enemy health and low player health. It makes the game more lethal and feels overall just generally better. This game isn't really always about going loud or always about stealth. It's a mix, and putting all that mix together is what makes it fun or not. Star Wars is a weird one. I love the bit-by-bit shooting. The exploration's fantastic most of the time. The stealth system's enjoyable, or at least way more than I expected. However, when you try to be a master of all things, you usually aren't great at anything. And Star Wars falls directly into this, and the place you notice it the most is after a couple hours. Over time, I began to realize just how closed off the game was when trying to do a bit more or dive into something a bit deeper. This is reflected in a game like Red Dead 2, which had some of these complaints as well about mission restriction, but because of that in-depth, really heartfelt story, it carried you through some of those spots. And the story could maybe be interesting, but it's cookie cutter enough that I wasn't wondering what was going to happen. I was wondering why any of us had bothered to get there. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, deep sale, or never touch system, but this is also Ubisoft's subscription service as well. So I'm going to rate this one a tiny bit different. Now, first, my attitude towards the game changed no less than 3 times, which is historically about the way it goes, especially because 1 hour doesn't feel the same as 6, 8, or 20, or 30. I'll say it's worth waiting on a sale or getting on the subscription right up front. It's got all the tools there. A small gear and a big friggin' machine is an awesome idea, but only if you show what it does intrinsically or show what happens when it breaks. Neither truly really happens here. However, in the end, a lot of it also comes down to the technical issues, the odd AI, and the repetitiveness of it, outweighing the excellent world and the fun moments, something that you may completely not agree with me on. If you're one of those people that just wants to go in, doesn't care about the story, shoot some stuff, ride around on spacer bikes, and jump into spaceships, fly to different places, and basically try to piss everybody off, this game, you could do far worse. I do want to note that Ubisoft has tried to take care of as many accessibility options as humanly possible here. It's just impressive how much they have in the game, and it makes the game a better experience for it. In the next coming weeks, you'll have Carnage on the podcast, some devs. We're going to try to get Brian Fargo on as well. Check out the podcast on the new podcast channel. When you guys end up getting the game, I'd love for you to come back and say after, 20 or 30 hours what you felt of it. Subscribe.